Hello everyone, welcome to a special midweek driving video. Today's topic is, well, appropriately, driving. So if you live in Japan, you're going to nod along with this. You probably have seen all of this that I'm going to talk about. If you're planning on living in Japan, this could be very useful for you to know the sort of things you might want to get used to or you need to be aware of when it comes to driving here. And even if you're a tourist who is thinking of coming to Japan and you might want to consider getting a rental car, and so this video will be of use to you. And if you're none of those things, well, enjoy some beautiful Japanese scenery as I take some back roads through beautiful Yamanashi Prefecture. I'm going to be going on some quite narrow roads, which is probably one of the first things you have to be aware of if you are going to drive in Japan, especially if you're in the countryside. Lots and lots of narrow roads out here. Back roads abound. They're often one of the faster ways to get from point A to point B. You will want to use them. And actually, it's kind of a misnomer to say only in the countryside, because there's plenty of narrow lanes and alleyways and places in the larger cities, even Tokyo, etc. So narrow roads are definitely a thing, and you'll see a bunch of them on today's drive. So enjoy. Probably the big question to address right away is, what is the real difference between American and Japanese drivers? And I can only really compare to American drivers because I've only lived in the US and Japan. I've actually driven in Italy before, but that was a long time ago and I don't really remember. I also don't remember having any real issues driving in Italy too. It seemed like it was, you have this stereotype of Italians are very crazy drivers, but I didn't find that to be the case. I didn't think driving there was particularly difficult. And of course I've been in cars in places like Singapore and Canada and Mexico and Australia, but haven't actually driven there. So that's kind of a different thing. If you haven't actually driven, it's different than being a passenger. But at any rate, I can mostly compare it to American drivers. And the first thing that I could say about Japanese drivers compared to American is there are far less incidences of kind of payback road rage type incidents. And obviously in Japan, you're not going to have the threat of someone with a firearm or very unlikely any kind of weapon that's going to come after you. However, road rage does exist in Japan, and the main one I probably should point out is that a good way to experience it is if you honk at someone. One thing you'll notice very quickly if you're a tourist in Japan, drivers don't honk. There's not a lot of honking on the road. In fact, it's so startling when it actually happens, because it really is that rare. And unfortunately, that means that honking can trigger people for some reason. So I've actually had this happen to me. That my one road rage incident was someone did something super dangerous in front of me and I honked because I thought maybe they didn't realize I was in my lane where I was. And then it just became this super aggressive payback driving, that they were messing with me, like brake checking me and all this nonsense because I'd honked at them. And this is something that has actually been covered in the news in recent months as well, like road rage incidents, and a lot of them seem to be instigated by someone daring to use the horn. So yeah, using a horn is not a big deal in Japan. So use it wisely. Apparently, technically, it's only supposed to be used by law, quote, in emergencies, although I don't know what constitutes an emergency exactly. I don't know what really counts. Obviously, someone cutting you off in traffic is not an emergency, so you shouldn't be using your horn then from a legal sense. But I digress. Other ways that drivers are different in Japan, there seems to be a propensity to take turns more slowly and carefully in Japan. When people come up to intersections and make a left turn, right turn, it doesn't matter, they tend to do it quite slowly. And oftentimes it's bemusing. Like why are you going through this turn so slow? There's no pedestrian crossing. You have the right of way, there's no traffic coming, but people still will turn incredibly slowly. And I have to admit, it kind of irritates me, because I don't mind when people drive relatively slow. One thing you have to become just used to in Japan is elderly drivers. There's going to be a lot of elderly drivers on the road, and therefore they're more likely to drive slowly. And so you're just going to have to make peace with the fact that Japan is an aging society and you're going to have a lot of elderly people driving, which means slower traffic. But I've seen plenty of, middle-aged or young people make incredibly slow turns, and I've not quite figured out, is that what they teach in driver's ed and people just keep doing it? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me because, well, I said it irritates me, but it only irritates me in one instance. If someone turns slowly and it's just like at this intersection here right now, it's not a big deal. But what gets me is when I've been sitting in a long line of cars and I've sat through the same red light 2 or 3 or 4 times because it's basically a traffic jam and, only a certain number of cars are getting through the light at any one time. And I'm always thinking, when I get stuck behind someone who's turning super slowly, it's like, you realize you sat in the giant line. You realize this giant line still exists behind you. Get through the turn so we can get more people through the intersection. Maybe clear out this traffic jam a little bit. And that's when it irritates me. It's like, Japanese people tend to have a lot of awareness. For example, when they go to noodle shops for lunch, right? You eat quickly because you remember there was a line out the door. You stood in that line, and you waited, and people ate relatively quickly so that you could get in and get your lunch hour done. And there's people still standing in that line, so you don't dally over a Tokyo lunch counter, like noodle counter like that. And that seems to be just a norm that everyone realizes and does. But when it comes to making turns, if someone out there knows if that's taught in driver's ed or that's how it works, or I would really like to know, because it is a phenomenon that's kind of odd. So I mentioned the elderly drivers thing. That's something to get used to. That van passing right now, you'll notice, has its lights on. That's highly unusual. There is no real rule in Japan about having your lights on. Oh, hang on a sec. I need to remember where this turn is. This road has changed. Okay, good. Yeah, I don't want to turn onto the expressway. I used to live in this neighborhood, and the roadway has changed significantly. So I still don't have it totally figured out the way the roads go now compared to back when. But at any rate, having lights on is not a norm in Japan. In America, it's pretty much the law that if your windshield wipers are moving, or it's dusk or dawn and it's not well lit, your lights are on. And in fact, it's pretty much the norm that American cars have their lights on all the time now. And I think that's great for safety purposes, because it's not about whether you can see or not. It's about improving how well people can see you. And you'll have tons of cars driving in the rain or at dusk, and they don't have their lights on yet, because there seems to be this attitude or feeling like, well, I can see, so I don't need to turn my lights on yet, which is irritating, because I've been in incidences where cars come up on me in an opposite lane, and they were hard to see because they're like a gray car, or they are a black car, and it's raining and it's dusk, and if they had their lights on, it'd be no problem at all to see them. Now, interestingly enough, there is someone who is obviously super local behind me. I'm on this narrow-ass road, and they are tailgating me. They obviously are like, you Yokohama plate car, you don't know this road, you're in my way. I might, if there's a place where I can kind of pull over and let them go around me, I think I will. I'll talk about tailgating in a moment, but I want to finish the lights thing. People not wearing lights, using lights. And see these mirrors here? Really useful if you have your lights on and you're approaching a mirror, because at dusk it's hard to see cars in those mirrors. If it's raining, it's hard to see cars in those mirrors, and those mirrors become rather important for navigation quite often. Oh shoot, I wanted to turn right there. Damn it. No, maybe I didn't. Yeah, this is all under construction, as you can see, so the roads have very much changed in terms of go. They weren't super tailgating me, not illegally so, but it was clear that they were impatient to get their move on. So don't hold it against them. I just felt it was a good idea to get out of their way, which you might want to do sometimes if you're driving here, especially if you don't know the roads very well. It's kind of rude to just putt around and not let people beyond you if they clearly have somewhere to be. But yeah, get used to a lot of people not having lights on when they really should. As for tailgating, as I mentioned, that person wasn't really all that close. It wasn't a big deal. But it does happen in Japan, and I would say surprisingly, it happens quite a bit with people driving trucks, like giant semi-tractor trailer trucks. I don't remember there being a lot of tailgating going on with the huge trucks on America's interstates. And to me, truck drivers can be a lot more rude here than in the US, in my experience. Like tailgating when there's people in front of me, which is bonkers because, I mean, I can't go anywhere. I can't go any faster. And you're on my butt for what reason exactly? That's super irritating. I hate that. And it is a thing, so be aware of that. Usually I just slow down at the speed limit because if you're going to rear end me, I don't want to be going too fast. Which, you know, maybe some people think that's me taking revenge or being a jerk. But no, I think the person tailgating is being a jerk. Let's go through the fun tunnel and see where it goes. See, nice mirror there. I can see that red car coming in the mirror because it's daytime, but at night, well, maybe the red car would be easy to see, but if that was a black car turning at dusk, having the lights on would be really quite helpful. Really quite helpful indeed. If you get caught on a narrow road like this with someone coming the other way, it just basically becomes a matter of someone needs to find a place to pull off to the side if it's not possible for you to just scooch past each other. Like pulling briefly into someone's driveway like this is sometimes necessary. Obviously, like right where I am right now, there is literally no space to pass someone directly, and you just kind of hope and pray that no one comes the other way when you're on a road like this. But at the same time, for me, it's kind of exhilarating and it's kind of fun. Okay, other driving issues. I have a joke about Japanese drivers. I said before that Japanese drivers are no better or no worse than American drivers. One place that they are definitely worse, though, is when it comes to parking. Japanese... Alright, we should have room to skitchy past each other here. Japanese will sometimes pull over and take a phone call, or pull over and like stop at a vending machine or something, and there's a wide open parking lot for like some giant box store like Uniqlo or a supermarket or something, and it's always, it's like a courtesy thing in a weird way. It's like, I'm not going to use this parking lot, I'm not going to take up a space in this parking lot because I'm not a customer of the store. I'm going to block traffic instead. Like, just literally have a line of cars end up stuck behind you waiting to get around you because you don't want to take up a space in that parking lot. That's one I've never... Ooh, no, that's way too narrow. I'm not going on that. It's on my Navi, but that ain't happening. I'll turn on to this one, see where this goes. Let the fun continue. Yeah, parking can be a weird thing. See, I'm pulling off to the side, just let them go. We'll have to back up a touch to get around this cone. If you take the Japanese driver test, you do have a section of the driver's test where you drive on a really itty-bitty narrow part of this course that they have made up. The driver's test is not on normal streets like it is in America. They actually have driver's courses that you use, and you take your test on the course. And you get a nice wave from the people when they see that you've let them by. But yeah, you do have to drive on a road like this as part of your driver's test. Not very far. It's just like a little S-curve type deal that is soon over. But if you bump the curb with your tire, it's an automatic fail. Good to slow down at these side streets, even if there's a mirror. The sun is in that mirror, so I can't really see anything. You never know when someone in a car or a bicycle or a little kid will pop out of those side streets, so better to be safe than sorry. Going through some nice farmland at the moment. Irrigation canals on both sides, which it bears mentioning that, like here, notice it's just open. There is no curb. There is no gutter. You can just drive off the side and your wheels will go and you'll tip into that little river there. So knowing the dimensions of your car and being careful along places like this that have these open waterways, open gutters, is very important. You need to learn the dimensions of your car relatively quickly, and Japanese people do. I mean, we haven't really seen much traffic on this road today, but you'll see people just whizzing along these narrow roads, and it's just because they have the utmost confidence that they know the dimensions of their car, and they know how to get around you, and they know how to not fall into the river. I've seen one car tip off the edge of a curb once, and it was because the person in the oncoming lane was just kind of overcrowding them. They didn't give them enough space. But in all my years driving here, one time seems indicative of it's not very common. Gave her a nice wave because she let me get out of that turn, and now I'm heading back to the main road because I'm kind of out of country road to follow that I'm familiar with and willing. I do have somewhere to be, so I don't want to get too lost. But at any rate, that was the narrow roads. Open gutters is a thing. Cars are basically equipped in Japan with an automatic retraction button on the side mirrors. I think that's become fairly standard on a lot of cars outside of Japan as well, but like a button to retract your mirrors to make your car narrower is actually a feature that's been around forever. I remember riding in one of my fellow teachers' cars in 2002 when I first got here, and was really amazed to see them hit a button when we were on this narrow road and there was a car coming the other way, and he hit this button and the mirrors just closed up, and it's like, wow. He's like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. Gotta have that in Japan. And he's not kidding. I have to retract my mirrors from time to time as well. But back to the parking issue. The other one is Japanese tend to all back into their parking spots. You go into a store parking lot and you back into the spot. And I mostly do that too. Like, I'm definitely in the habit of doing that now because it is safer, because you know what's going on in the lanes of the car park while you're backing in. So you can do that safely. And then you're pulling out frontwards when you leave, which means it's safer coming out of your parking spot. You're not backing out with blind spots because people have parked next to you, etc. So it's definitely safer, and I appreciate that, and I think that should be more of a thing elsewhere as well. But there's one time when I won't do it, and it's another time when Japanese will. And there's times when people will turn into a small parking lot, stop and back into a spot, and by virtue of backing into that spot, the next person can't get into the lot because they're waiting for the person backing in, and they're backing up traffic on the road. So you'll have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now there's 8 cars waiting for one person who's not even in the road to finish backing into their spot because someone else is waiting to get into that parking lot. And I mean, in those instances, if I know there's people behind me and they're coming in, I just drive straight into the parking spot head first, because I just want to get out of people's way. But yeah, a lot of Japanese will still back in that case, and the rest of traffic be damned. An interesting thing about the popularity of cars in Japan is you see a lot of smaller vehicles, obviously, good for navigating narrow roads, but you'll also see a lot of box cars. For some reason, the box style of car is incredibly popular. That light was orange when I hit the line, or what I should say, it turned orange as I was passing the line, so if I'd come to a screeching halt, I would have been in the intersection. So don't judge me in the comments. Box cars, incredibly popular. People love the one-box van in Japan. Young people will say they want the giant van that looks like a box, giant family car, and that's a very interesting difference, because in America people like sedans, they like sports cars, coupes, etc. SUVs obviously are king, but in Japan everyone wants the box van, especially the really expensive ones made by Toyota and Nissan, and to a lesser extent Honda. Toyota is usually king in Japan, make that clear. I'm not talking about these little boxes that are going along here. Maybe there'll be a big box we pass soon, I'll point it out. But yeah, I remember talking to these teenage boys, like, what is your dream car? And they're like, I want the giant Toyota box van thing. Like this one coming here. This van, that van is like dream car for Japanese men. Which is so different. Like in America, it was always, you made fun of if you had a minivan or like the family car. Like it wasn't the car that people aspired to. The last thing I'll say about car type and vans is there are these large Toyota kind of conversion vans, these big vans that are called Hiace is the name of the van, and they are hands down the worst drivers on the road. I firmly believe that if you walk into a Toyota dealership and say, I want to buy a Hiace, they make you take an exam or a questionnaire in which you have to prove that you always speed, you always tailgate, you never turn your lights on, you weave in and out of lanes dangerously. Basically, you need to prove that you are a total jerk before they'll let you buy one. Because it's uncanny how often one of those Hiaces is, just doing bonkers stuff when it comes to how they're driving. And it's not just me that believes this. I have my friends all say the same thing. The Toyota Hiaces with the Goodyear tires and silver rims. And there is a reason, though. Very often those are owned by companies. They're being driven by gyosha-san, like contractors, workers for a construction business or carpentry or plumbers or whatever. They're very often work vans. And I think it's just something about when you're driving a vehicle that is not yours, you're less likely to, really be careful and take care of it. I believe that's likelihood what's going on there. If you want to know about the driver's exam and what it's like to pass the driver's exam in Japan, I could do a video about that. I actually did a video about that probably back in the year 2020, so a long time ago, but I should probably do an updated version of that. That's all I can think of for the moment in terms of driving in Japan. Okay, one rule that if you're coming from America, be aware of, you must always come to a complete stop at railroad crossings. You may not just roll over the railroad crossing like most people do in the States. I understand there is kind of a law about that in the States, but it's one that's not followed or policed. Pretty much school buses and buses in general are the only vehicles that stop at railroad crossings. Regular cars tend to just roll over them. But in Japan, you will definitely get in trouble for that. The police will set up sting operations by railroad tracks, and if they see you just roll over without a complete stop, they will pull you over and give you a ticket. Alcohol is zero tolerance in Japan. You may not have any alcohol if you're driving. You know, it's not like the various rules in the States where like, oh, if your blood alcohol level is point whatever, you're okay. You had one beer, so you can still drive. No, not at all. Zero tolerance in Japan. You may not have any booze whatsoever. However, interestingly enough, there may be open booze in the car. Like, open containers are illegal in America. You can't be drinking in the car itself. But in Japan, your passengers can drink if they want. So I'll never forget my first trip with other teachers. We were all in this rented van, and we get underway, and the teachers are all popping open beers. I'm like, wait, what? You can do that? So yeah, totally different rule in that sense. You can absolutely have a beer if you are a passenger in a vehicle. It's just that the driver may have absolutely zero alcohol. All right, making my turn. It's been lovely talking to you. There's other things I could definitely talk about. If you want a follow-up to this video in the future, let me know. Please like and subscribe if this was any use to you, and you can support me in various ways that I'll link below. At any rate, thanks very much for watching this particular video. I hope you enjoyed the drive on this late fall, early winter day, and I will catch you on my normal Saturday morning Japan time, Friday evening America time video. Hope to see you then. Peace.